This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Today, it is my honor to introduce a woman who is not only shaking up the retail industry, but also helping millions of clients globally to choose self-confidence over self-consciousness each and every day. Lisa Sun is the founder and CEO of Gravitas, a revolutionary company on a mission to catalyze confidence through innovative, size-inclusive apparel, styling solutions, and content designed to make women over from the inside out. Driven by feedback that she lacked Gravitas, along with an understanding of the transformational power of clothing, Lisa filed a global patent to build shapewear directly into dresses and launched the game-changing company in 2012 to empower women to look and feel their best through fashion. 2 months after launching, Gravitas was featured in Oprah Magazine, People Magazine, and on the Today Show all in the same month for its inclusive, confidence-boosting clothing. The company hasn't slowed down since. It's been featured by Forbes, Fast Company, Elle, CNN, Marie Claire, InStyle, and more. In addition to being a founder and CEO, Lisa is the national best-selling author of Gravitas, The 8 Strengths That Redefine Confidence. The book is a USA Today bestseller and reached #1 for its genre on Amazon. Prior to launching Gravitas, Sun spent 11 years at McKinsey & Company advising the world's leading luxury brands on strategic and operational issues. Inspiring self-belief through how we show ourselves to the world, Lisa demonstrates how to let go of fear, get off the sidelines, and jump boldly into the game of life with Gravitas. And now, please join me in welcoming Lisa Sun. Lisa, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is so exciting to actually have you here on the show. You know, we met once in New York, and I actually was in the audience when you were giving a talk, which was probably one of the most exciting talks I've been to. I've been to a lot of these, and I don't necessarily get excited. I was energized. And by happenstance, after that talk, we got to go to dinner, and you were at my table, and it was just amazing. And here we are, years later. I've got a show, you agreed to be on it, and we're here together, and it's exciting for me, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Artis. And you know, one of those things that I love to say is you're meant to meet in that moment. We have this, I'm Taiwanese, and in Taiwanese culture, we have a phrase called 缘分, which means destiny. And it's sort of like we were probably relatives in a former life, and we were meant to reconnect in this moment to make a difference in each other's lives. But whenever we say in Chinese, 我们有缘, or we have destiny, It means like we were meant to meet. And I feel that is so true about the two of us.
I could not agree more. And it's, for me, that's a very deep and personal thing for me, because I don't always have that connection immediately with people. And it was almost, it's very difficult to describe, because our conversation was not one of those kind of small talky, kind of top of the topic type of things, but really we got to know each other at that dinner, and I've felt this connection since then. So again, I can't believe, first of all, you had enough time to be able to sit down and first have a conversation. But it is amazing to actually have this time with you.
Well, I will say 2 things about that. First of all, I did tell you that you have NPR voice. You have National Public Radio voice. So I feel like I was part of the journey to create this podcast, just because sitting next to you, I felt calm and present. And I remember stopping you and saying, you have public radio voice. Like, you need to do something with that. I think everyone that works with you probably feels the same. And then the second thing is, and we should dive into it, I really have a whole philosophy about those dinners you're stuck at.
Yeah.
And Artis, while I definitely felt our connection to be organic and natural, there's actually a whole approach to how not to have small talk at the dinner table, especially at industry events, that I'd love to teach you and your listeners. But it's a whole philosophy on how do we connect with others beyond demography. And I'd love to dive deep into that because it might explain why you felt that way.
Oh, that would actually be amazing to discuss. And you definitely are part of this journey for podcasting. You know, I have been told before that people like to hear me talk in the exam lane. Patients feel comfortable. Generally, my colleagues feel comfortable. I'm able to kind of navigate situations and make them feel at ease. And although I don't hear it, other people do. And so it was definitely part of it. And delving a little bit into your book, which we're also going to talk about, there were pieces that really that I could just relate to because performing is not on the top of my list, but there are other things that are. And this allows me to share those other things in an environment that doesn't require the performing piece to be up front. So, but we'll talk about that.
Well, and you have a co-pilot in life, Sue Downs, who is the performing. You don't have to have all of them. You can complement each other.
It is so true. And when I was reading that part, all I could imagine is, oh my gosh, this is Sue and here's me and we're together and it makes a lot of sense now. So, but let's talk about the dinner and the demography because I think that's really interesting.
Well, one of the things, and I cannot take credit for it, Adam Bryant, who was a columnist for the New York Times, he used to write Corner Office. He said and I went to a dinner where he was speaking, and he said, look, so much of the time when you meet someone, you try to connect with them. We're built to connect. And he said, most people ask demographic questions like, where do you live? Where did you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And he said, the problem is if you have no demography in common, how do you bridge the gap? And so he said, I, as a journalist, ask passionately curious questions. And so one of his famous questions was, tell me a moment from your childhood that was formative. And he said that these CEOs that he would interview, you know, you can read their resume. Like, I think we know everything about everyone on LinkedIn. I don't need to ask you demographic questions. In less than 30 seconds with your full name and where you work, I can probably deduce everything about you demographically.
Yeah.
And he said, if you ask someone a passionately curious question, it changes the way in which you connect and you might surface values, stories. So when I was at McKinsey, you know, I grew up fairly poor in a desert, working in my parents' Mongolian barbecue restaurant in Fontana, California, and put myself through school on scholarship, worked my way up the corporate ladder. My favorite boss, incredibly wealthy, British, white, male, rode Oxford Blue. When we met for the first time, he did not ask me any demographic questions. In fact, he said, I looked it all up in the system. I know everything about you. And he said, tell me something that you're really proud of. And I told him about working in my parents' restaurant when I was 8 years old. And he said, I love that story. I love hustle. Let's do this thing together. And so I think when we met, that is my philosophy on life, right? I always ask passionately curious questions. So I knew from your name badge where you worked, who you worked with. I knew how important it is, what you do in the world. And we talked about your mother. We talked about why you became a doctor. We talked about your philosophy with patients. You know, we talked about things that weren't about demography because I connected you with you on LinkedIn that night. So I knew everything. I knew where you went to college. And I think that is a skill that most of us need to be even better at. So my 29-year-old chief of staff had to go to a couple of very fancy weddings, and she did not grow up fancy. And she said, I have real anxiety about talking to posh people. And so we said, okay, you can ask a couple of questions, right? And we taught her to say, how do you know everyone? How are you connected to everyone, right? That's not a demographic. It's, oh, this is my best friend from college, and let me tell you the story of how we met. And we said, when people ask you what you do, because unfortunately people always ask you what you do, don't give them your title and your company. Say, hey, I love helping women feel confident. And that's why I'm so excited that I get to put that to work, working for this amazing company called Gravitas. You know, I said, lead with the mission, lead with your purpose, and then tell people you're the chief of staff at this awesome high growth company.
Yeah.
But we really taught her, and she came back from the first wedding in Italy and she said, I had the best time, right? we just had interesting conversations. It didn't feel, because whatever happens when you're at a dinner party or a cocktail hour or something, and you're like, okay, where are you from? Where do you work? And then there's that awkward pause.
Yeah.
And you're like, do you need a drink? I'm going to go get a drink. Or, hey, I see someone I want to say hello to. And I want to help people avoid that awkwardness.
Yeah.
So you and I were seated next to each other. We actually were locked in for an hour and a half together. And it was really, we had so much fun with our table. I felt like we were the fun table.
It was the fun table. It definitely was the fun table. It's just interesting to think about it in those terms, because it can be very, very difficult to be the person who knows no one in a situation and then have to navigate that situation. And if you're more introverted, it causes more anxiety. It makes that more difficult to do. And while I never think about it from the dinner table side or the party side, because, those are things, and I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do that. In the exam lane, it is like that all the time. And this point is fantastic, because I call it my instant 15-minute friend. And so you're trapped in this room with someone that you likely do not know for 15 minutes or 20 minutes at a time. And you have the choice of creating a rapport that's going to carry you through this exam, or you can just try to get the job done and hope that everything's going to be okay. And what you learn is that you're exactly right. Like, you don't want to know the obvious. You really want to know, like, it's more about, what are you using your eyes for? What are the things that you are involved in? What are the things that you do? Because they don't really know that there's a visual component that you may be able to help them with. And if you can have that conversation like that, it does make for a better exam, better outcomes from everyone. And I should have taken that little lesson and kind of applied that to the rest of my world.
Artist, I think you're incredibly good at what you do. And so now you can say, okay, every single dinner party or cocktail party I don't want to go to, I'm just going to treat like the exam room. This is an examination. But one of the things, and I think this is because I grew up the daughter of immigrants, we were the only Asian family in town. I think when you're an outsider, always trying to be included or be seen or valued or appreciated, you start to pinpoint those places where you have felt most excluded. And I think that's why we do what we do, or I even wrote this book, is I sort of said, I never want people to feel unseen at work or feel awkward in this interaction or feel like they can't get what they want. And so something as small as you're seated next, and that's in my book, right? You're seated next to someone you don't know at a dinner. And do you feel comfortable and confident in those situations? And I find it's not about, I want you to be an extrovert. I don't want anyone to change who they are, but I want you to have a couple of tools to say, how did you end up at this party? Tell me how you know everyone. And actually, I hate the question, what do you do for a living? Because what if you're seated next to a full-time parent who actually feels insecurity about they used to work and they don't anymore? I always find that question a trap, because it means I'm trying to size you up. I'm trying to decide if you're worthy of my attention. So what I always like to say instead is like, how do you make a difference in the world? Like, what are you excited about? What are you into right now? And you realize they could answer the question as a Netflix show they're into. And, oh my gosh, I'm writing that one down. Or, hey, I volunteer doing this. This is my passion in life. It just changes the way people feel seen as well.
I think you're in the book, or when I think about the book as a whole, right? Like, it is definitely geared toward women. However, in going through the book and understanding a lot of the scenarios, I really do think that it is also geared towards anybody who feels like they're not as empowered as they'd like to be, and it applies across the board to anybody in a variety of situations.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ars. And actually, what's funny is my publisher and my agent, about a third of the readers have been men or non-binary. And it's an interesting question around, why did you write the book with women in mind, right? And I'll tell you, the first thing is I could have written a general pop book, a general population book. And I thought to myself, well, there are enough general books about confidence as a topic, right? And if we take it through the lens of women, I think you get at some of the deeper systemic bias issues. You can double click on some of the insecurities at a deeper level, and it makes the insights that more laser focused. I think when men read it, or non-binary, I think there's two things that happen. One is there's actually a whole group of fairly what you might call introverted personalities in our data set, where they go, I actually feel seen. Like, I know you wrote this, but this kind of works for me too, because I am an outsider in some sense, right? I have been labeled by society as not fitting the mold of what's valued and accepted. Or, and I love this, men who have come up to me and said, I finally understood allyship, or it finally made me see someone on my team differently. And those reviews on Amazon are some of my favorite. Like, one person said, I think we've been coaching and leading women incorrectly and incompletely. That the scorecard by which we define their success has been incomplete. This helped me. And whenever I do events with financial services company where the majority are men, I get a lot of feedback saying, this was so helpful because this allows us to try and see why we've been so blindsided by women leaving the firm, because we've created a single scorecard, probably developed over decades, and this changes the way we talk about it. So I'm grateful that you enjoyed it, but I had to explain to you why I wrote it with women in mind, just because I think some of the data, some of the insights had to be a bit punchier and a little bit more in your face. If I'd written general pop, it would have been like, I don't think any different than some of the general books on confidence.
And I think that's fair. And I did not, having some historical knowledge of Gravitas and having met and talked to you, when I picked up the book, I assumed that it would be geared more toward women. But I also assumed, after having heard you talk, that there would be lots of things that would be applicable across the board. And really, there were pieces of it where I thought, oh my gosh, you are identifying exactly why this is a problem, and people who are not having this problem need to understand it because they're likely causing some of this. And so I thought it was I thought it was a really great approach. But, I think I have a great friend who says, you know what, to go forward, we got to go backwards. So let's go backwards for just a minute. Because in the book, you referenced the restaurant and your mom, who I feel like I know your mom, even though I don't. And she seems like it's such a wonderful person. But you talked about being proud of a moment that you spent in the restaurant, and I kept waiting to figure out what that moment was, and I don't know that I got it. So can you talk a little bit about that moment in your childhood?
Yeah, so I always say your life story is your leadership story. So all of us need to pick a couple moments in our life story to talk about. I always say the formation of where I am today really came in two places. The first being my parents are immigrants from Kaohsiung, Taiwan, college educated, came to the U.S. with nothing. Mom worked on a hamburger truck. Dad worked on a loading dock. Owned an all-you-can-eat Mongolian barbecue in the 80s and 90s, $4.95 at lunch, $12.95 at dinner. And at 8 years old, I don't think my mother understood child labor laws, so I was the first cashier at the restaurant. Number one, she's super smart because I think no one dines and dashes when an 8-year-old's on the counter. They feel really bad for this family. Also a very small desert town. Secondly, I can now tell you that an 8-year-old does not have the grip strength to run the carbon copy credit card machine. For your younger listeners, this is like in Home Alone 2 when Kevin checks into the plaza and they use a carbon copy machine. I had to lean up on the counter and push down because if a number was missing, my parents didn't get paid. And then I would say the third thing is you get to see what it's like to create something from nothing, right? I was there the day they got the keys to the location. I was there when my dad was with a handsaw putting up, the booths for each of the dining areas. I was there when they closed up at night, doing my exam books. So when you can create something from nothing and you see people who have vision before reality, and then they will it into existence, it gives you a sense of possibility. But like in terms of formative moments, I remember, if you're an immigrant kid, you don't really understand birthday parties. And when I was 12 years old, my mom said, you can have a birthday party. We'll have it at the restaurant. It'll be on a Saturday. And she was like, kids eat for free, but adult must pay. And I actually think she picked like a slow Saturday so she could drive lunchtime volume, right? So she's like, I invite everyone in class, but adult must be there. I don't want to babysit kid. Your birthday, kid eat free, but parent must pay. And so I think maybe 20 kids and 20 parents showed up. So my mom probably made like $100 extra of volume that day.
That's awesome.
So my first ever real American birthday party was literally an opportunity, I think, to drive volume on a slow Saturday.
Incredible.
Those are the things I think you learn. And then I think when you couple that with 11 years at McKinsey & Company, the management consulting firm, you start to realize the Venn diagram of why I run a company now, right?
Yeah.
There's like this sort of hustle, this drive, this creative resourcefulness, and then coupled with 11 years of being at one of the world's best firms, you start to say, okay, that makes sense that in 2013 you take your life savings and do this crazy thing. But that's kind of what I would say the formative childhood experiences were, is, seeing little things. And now in my 40s, I pick up on these things. I have memories, like the 12-year-old birthday party. By the way, I will tell you, the only reason I remember this party is I think my mom's feeling nostalgic and she's sending me on text message old photos of childhood moments, because she's seen all my talks about inner child. She joined a Zoom for one of my clients. And so she's like, oh, I give you more photos for the speech. I'm like, I don't need more photos for my speech of me as a kid. And I saw this birthday party photo. I'm like, Mom, I remember this correctly, that you charged everyone to come to my birthday party? She's like, kids eat for free. And I didn't misremember this. I remembered this one accurately.
That is the best. That is the best. And so your mom has been kind of a guide, and at some point she gives you a hard time. Other points she's really encouraging you to think differently. Like when you were so let's talk about McKinsey for a second though, because that is a much longer than a second in your life. You spent a long time at McKinsey, which is unusual. How did that happen, and what held you there for as long as you were?
Well, I always say most people stay 18 to 24 months. I spent 11 years there. So thank goodness I have Asian genetics. It's an aging process when you work there. I loved the combination of client service and being able to build high performing teams. I would say that the combination of getting to do really tough things in compressed timeframes, I don't think there's many places in the world where you get those opportunities. Mm-hmm. I was very lucky in that the clients that I worked with were all in high growth stages. Like I didn't have to do turnarounds. I didn't have to do cost cutting. Oftentimes, and you've experienced this, private equity acquires a company and they swoop McKinsey in for 6 months to help think through how they're going to triple the growth. I really fell in love with my clients, and most of my client work was repeat. So I love helping people do tough things in tight time frames. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes where there might be internal politics that are holding back an opportunity, or the need for more resources, and whether or not you like it, McKinsey can help advocate for those resources, right? I know there's a complicated relationship with consultants, but in my experience for those 11 years, I loved client service. I think and I get to do client service now, just it's differently. It's direct to consumer. And then on the other side, I would say, how lucky am I that I had all these incredible mentors that were very tough on me, that sculpted me into the type of leader I've become, also taught me what I didn't want to be. So that's good too. And I think McKinsey is a unique place for that. I would say layered on top of this, and I write about this in my book, and I think that's important. I also left in part because, number one, I somewhat didn't have a choice, right? They showed me the ladder forward and they gave me an opportunity, which I said, look, I think that is not what I want to do for the next 2 years. but I'm happy that you offered it to me and I want this position. And they were like, you know what? You're pretty far from getting that position. And I thought to myself, I looked around and I said, no one looks like me around here. When I joined the firm in September of 2000, less than 13% of the global partnership were women, of which I believe 2 percentage points were women of color. It's changed a lot. I think the number's closer to 18 to 19% women now. But at the time, what I didn't understand was the scorecard wasn't built to see me. It wasn't built to see an Asian American woman who had basically, done everything she could to be in this position. And so every year when evaluations came around and someone said to me, you know what, I think we have a square peg, round hole situation, I didn't hear them. I thought it was my fault. I thought I wasn't good enough. I beat myself up for not getting the promotion. When fundamentally, I think so many people along the way were saying, we just don't know what to do with you, right? We haven't seen you before. And now I can label it a form of systemic bias. But at the time, I was insecure, highly overachieving, and fundamentally the place wore me down. And I love McKinsey. I love my colleagues. I loved my clients. It wasn't about that. It was more like at that point in my life, I thought I am going to literally break.
Yeah.
And in the book, I took a year off. And thank you, McKinsey. They gave me an 11-month paid sabbatical. I mean, where else in the world do you get that? So 11 months to go around the world and soul search. I'm very grateful for that. But I wish I had this book when I was 25 years old. I wish I could have gone back in time, Back to the Future style in the DeLorean and give myself I think you write the book you most need to read yourself. I wish I could have told the 25-year-old version of myself, hey, you can stay here, but it's not your fault. It's you can twist yourself into a pretzel, you can do everything perfectly, and it still might not go your way.
Yeah. It's interesting to me how often we, in general, get comfortable in a spot, and we don't always think about what is next. So you're spending the time making that spot as great as you can make it, and you're not necessarily where you want to be or where you really should be. And one of the things that really stuck out for me in one of the passages was about scoring and scorecards. And you just mentioned scoring. That just kind of made me think about it. Literally it was a kind of stop and think about it moment, in that it scores and grading really only counts when you're in primary school. Like after that, nobody's really keeping a grade or grade card for you. And it's just that it's a crazy concept, because you build into your brain, this is how it works. I do really well. Somebody scores it. They love it. So I get more because I did really well. And that's just not the way it works.
I think this is a really important concept in our book, where we say, look, after you graduate from high school or college, no one's handing out blue ribbons, right? Up until a certain point, an A is an A, regardless of your gender, regardless of your background, right? You hand in a blue book, you deserve an A or you don't. And when you leave that cocoon, there are scorecards, but they're subjective. And that subjectivity means you have to have a deep understanding of whose scorecard do you want to sign up for? Do you want to change that scorecard? Do you want to be the trailblazer? Or do you want to go to a place where, your talents and talents are valued in that way? And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a good example. Kelly Shue at Yale, she's a professor at Yale, looked at 30,000 employee records. And she said, over and over again, we saw a pattern in the data set. Women were scored the highest on results and actual performance, but the lowest on promotability. The reverse were true for men. Men were high on promotion potential, but low on actual results. And she said, when we double clicked on how promotability was scored, it was extroversion and charisma. It had nothing to do with actual work, and actual skills. And she said, so now we know that 40% of the pay gap is actually because of a subjective scorecard, right? When you decompose the gender gap, there's 40% related to promotion, because you're just not getting promoted to those higher levels of pay. And she said, now we know from a data standpoint, it's because the scorecard by which we measure promotability is totally subjective. And so, I can talk about this now, 24 years later. But at the time, when I left the firm in 2012, I didn't have that vocabulary. And I thought most of the problem was me, and I didn't work hard enough, or I didn't do enough of the right things. And now, over a decade later, I can say, that's probably somewhat true. I bet a third of it was like, I could have worked harder on like networking with this person or doing more of this. But now I can say, hey, 2/3 of it were what the firm wanted and valued was different than my natural talents. Like, I don't think creating or performing, which are two of the 8 superpowers we talk about, those are two of my top ones. I don't think those are conducive to being a consultant. I just don't. But they're very conducive to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So, it's not that the firm is right or wrong. It's just that the ways in which they measured promotion and success weren't necessarily lined up with the things that I think I'm the best at or most talented at.
And you had that period post McKinsey, prior to Gravitas, where you were figuring all this stuff out. And how did you put it together and really decide, you know what, this is the best way for me to use my talent? I see that I am good at fashion. Fashion means something. It can make people feel more confident. I can put this together and turn it into something that was never done before.
Yeah, my mom, as you know, my mom convinced me to take my life savings and do this. And she emailed everyone in my life and said, you help Lisa start company, okay? So really, like, I was taking a year off, going around the world by myself. It was kind of amazing until she said, you need to go back to work. Like, you can't just goof off for the rest of your life. I would say that many of my friends who are entrepreneurs will not say that they had that moment in the shower. Like, I just don't have those like lightning bolts. But I started with this idea of our mission is we catalyze confidence.
Okay.
I literally wrote down, we catalyze confidence. That was kind of the core thought. It expresses itself through fashion and clothes we make, but also now through content, experiences, right? It's actually expanded beyond that because I think fashion fundamentally is becoming commoditized. I think you can buy anything, anywhere on sale. And so really, fashion was an entree to pull out all of our ideas and create a vehicle through which we could reach people. I think now we sell a book for $26.99. I think that is not as good as a dress, but you still get that feeling of what we do in clothing. And so I don't think there was ever we are going to be the next $1 billion fashion brand. That was never the metric. It was, we catalyze confidence. And what are the places where women are the most insecure? And I was thinking to myself, and I've been various sizes in my life. I've been a size 20, 22, 18, currently a 12. I've been so many sizes. And I thought to myself, geez, it is a soul destroying process to go into a dressing room. It's just every single thing I hate about myself comes out in a dressing room. And I thought, could we make that dressing room feel different? Could we make that affirming? Could we make that joyous again, right? Like you were 5 years old and you're trying on a dress for the first time and your mom said you could have whatever you wanted. And then I thought, okay, what other moments do people feel insecure? When they go through a divorce, when they are trying to get a new job, or they've lost a job, or when they've just had a baby and they're like, I had to go back to work. I just thought about all these life moments that expose that negative self-talk. And that really is what we try to do. Again, we make clothes, we do lots of things, but at the core of it, we solve this core problem of, in these moments when you feel the worst about yourself, are we there for you?
It's a really interesting concept to me because it's a very true thing. Like when you go and you are, and this counts for men too, you're going and you're going to go try on whatever you're going to try on. And you get distracted sometimes by, here I am trying on this thing, but here are all the things I don't like. And so it's not going to work. I'm not going to like, and so you go in with this predisposition, right? And so reading about the concept of the fitting room and how people would be like, oh, this must be a skinny mirror. And you're like, no, it came from Bed Bath and
Bed Bath and Beyond.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Bed Bath and Beyond.
And so, I mean, it's amazing though that concept is one that extends so far beyond that fitting room, and it really does mean a difference in people's lives.
Well, and that is where we came up with the whole approach that's in the book, right? It came with this insight, which is we as humans are born fully self-confident. If you ask any 5-year-old what they're the best at in the world, they'll tell you right away, I'm the best at soccer, I'm the best at hugs, I'm the best at everything. Like there's just a full sense of potential. And what we realize is between the ages of 8 and 12, there are 6 forces that show up in our life that hold us back from being confident. It's the formation of an inner critic. And it's everything from, we call it deficit mindset, where you think about your weaknesses before your strengths. So when you look in the mirror, do you look for the new wrinkles or your beautiful eyes? Or things like shrinking effect, where you underestimate or shortchange yourself. The best way to think about this is, do you say sorry when you're not even sorry? That just assumes you're less than. So we identified these 6 forces. And I say to people, you got to figure out which of these 6, it could be all 6. I woke up with all 6 in my head today. But these 6 forces are real. They happen every single day. And you have to make a choice to break out of them, change your mindset. And that's where we get into superpowers and how you see yourself in order to behave differently, right? For us, confidence is a choice and a mindset before it becomes a behavior. And why does the dressing room play into that? Every woman I dress comes into the dressing room with all 6 forces. Mm-hmm. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I hate my arms. That dress looks good on the mannequin, but it won't look good on me. Systemic bias is one of our 6 forces. A mirror inside a dressing room is the worst idea, because as soon as you see yourself half undressed, you just don't feel like trying on clothes. And so what I always tell people is, before we start a fitting, you're going to leave your inner critic behind, and you're going to tell me what you like about yourself, what your best friend would tell me about you, what you're the best at in the world, what you're proud of from the last 12 months of your life. And people don't like having this conversation, but I always tell people, I refuse to dress you without it. And as soon as they start answering these questions, and I bet you feel this in the exam room, they start to laugh, they change their tone, we have a really great conversation, and then all of a sudden, they're like so happy with what they've chosen. Actually, some of your partners from Essilor Luxottica came to my office, and it was so fun because we did the dressing room experience, and they just had so much fun. They're like, this is amazing. There are no mirrors until I'm dressed, which is great. And they were just like half undressed in the middle of our office. But every time they're in New York, they text me and they said, we want to stop by the closet. Can we just stop by the closet for 30 minutes? But I think that analogy extends to how you take on the day, right? So the way you enter a dressing room is the way you enter every day. And so until you change your mindset, until you change how you see yourself, your day will feel negative, or you will evaluate yourself harshly, or you will feel like you failed. It'll be a zero-sum game.
I think that is fantastic advice. And it's one of those things that once you get your mind wrapped around, you have to first realize that you're doing it, because most people, a lot of people don't realize that that is the mindset that they're carrying, right? Because it becomes at some point the norm. So once you realize that that is not the way you want your mind to sit, then you have to work on, okay, how do I reposition it? And how do I wake up in the morning understanding that these feelings or these thoughts are there, but I can replace them with thoughts that put me in a different position?
So what I always tell people, and before we get into all the superpowers that we identified, I always tell people you need to have a trigger for a change in mindset. And everyone on my team, when they join our team, they have to submit a photo of themselves when they felt their most powerful. Like, so do you ever have people say, I used to be so brave? Or if you knew me when I was 8, I thought I was going to be an astronaut, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so everyone on our team has to keep on their desk a photo of themselves. I'm showing artists a photo of me when I was 9 and my parents took us to see snow for the first time. Everyone on my team keeps a photo of themselves from a younger time. So our head designer is the day he came to America in 2006 from Mongolia, and it's him in New York for the first time. Or our chief of staff, it's a photo of her at 7 years old, and she just looks so happy and joyous. And I always say that is the mindset you're switching on. So maybe it's not a photo. A lot of people love the photo idea, And it's actually, when you visit our office, it's kind of fun to see everyone's photos. It makes you smile. It disarms vendors. Vendors are like, I can't charge more. Look at their cute faces. But I think all of us, and that's really where the idea of fashion came up, right? Which is a dress that's like Dumbo's flying feather. He didn't need it to fly, but it reminded him that he could. So every one of us will wake up each morning with an inner critic with all 6 forces. I do almost every day. And you have to have something that switches on that mindset that says, okay, I'm not going to give you control, inner critic. I'll listen to you and tell you that you're wrong. But now let me make a choice around the strongest version of myself.
Finding that trigger. I love that. We're going to talk about superpowers here, but the story about Lunar New Year was, I thought, amazing. And the dressing, the styles. So up until this point, I think you had the styles of the clothing were not, they didn't have color and patterns. And you decided, your team actually came to you and said, hey, let's do something different. And you said, yes.
Because I'm wearing it today. I'm wearing the Lunar New Year right now. That's so funny. Look, I always say, Gravitas, we will only own 10% of your closet. I'm not naive. Like, everybody buys from different brands. And I said, but we want to be the most valuable player in your closet. We want to be the thing you wear 3 or 4 times a week. And you can't wear color 3 or 4 times a week. So we did like little black dresses, black leggings, like navy, right? We were always the foundational piece. And someone on my team said, we're the MVP too in terms of storytelling. And we're the thing that people compliment you on. So it doesn't have to be that you wear it often. It's that when you wear it, people are kind of wowed by it. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? And most of our team is of AA, NHPI heritage. NH is new. And they said, we want to do something for Lunar New Year. We're mostly Asian, so we're not co-opting culture, all these things. And I said, okay, here's a small budget and go ahead.
Okay.
I will tell you that the first collection failed. It did not pay back on its investment, but it taught us a lot about having more fun with the clothes, more color. It taught us what vendors we could use that were different than our traditional ones. And then the next year it did well. And then it led to all these other products. In fact, someone on Instagram messaged me, we have this dress that's a rainbow. And she said, I have never received more compliments on anything I've owned. And I'm 62 years old.
Oh, wow.
She said, people stop me on the street to tell me they love my rainbow dress. So I would say one, made me change kind of the core philosophy of the product merchandising, which is it's your most valuable player, not just in terms of how often you want to wear it, but in terms of how you're seen in it and how you feel in it. And then for my team, from a capability standpoint, I think it allowed them to flex new muscles, try new things, and it birthed new ways of doing the work. We have a really cool collection coming out now where it's just like clockwork, right? People are like, oh, we'll get the print design. This will happen. We'll get this person to do it. And it's been fun. And we got to donate to Stop API Hate and really be a part of our community in a different way.
Well, the reason I think that is so important from a story perspective is that it's really tied to learning to use your superpowers and looking at or learning about the superpowers that you haven't yet developed. And the fact that you're gonna make those mistakes and it could be tough, but you have to remember how to recover from that and learn from those mistakes as you start to develop that.
Yeah, I also think, and this is something that I wrote about a little bit, I think there's also this thinking around shedding, right? Which is shedding the stories we tell ourselves. And what I mean by that is I never wanted to be known as an Asian female entrepreneur. I just want to be an entrepreneur, right? And then over time, and I think that's just because I grew up in a place where we didn't belong to anything. We weren't part of anything. And so my parents were like, let's assimilate, like just achieve and like forget your heritage, right? Thank goodness I speak I speak Mandarin Chinese. I feel like that's the one part they enforced. But my little brother is a millennial and he's an activist and he's like, you've got to own your truth. You have to own who you are, right? And I call myself a reluctant activist. And I think in my 40s, it's really been okay to talk about where I'm from, what I stand for, speaking up for different underrepresented communities. And I've never been like an activist, right? So it's fun to be able to build new superpowers, test new things on my team. But more importantly, I'm like shedding all these old messages I told myself of like, just fit in, just don't stand out too much. And now it's like, no, I'm really proud that I'm part of all these different communities. I can make a difference in many of them. I'm not afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's a real shift.
This concept of superpowers, I mean, we've alluded to it a little bit, well, maybe a lot bit. But I think it's kind of core to a lot of the things that you've discussed and helped people with. So how did you develop this concept of the 8 powers and start to move with that?
So in 2013, Janet Yellen was nominated to be the first woman head of the Federal Reserve. And there were hundreds of articles that she did not have the gravitas to lead the Fed. She did not have the sense of power and confidence. And Ezra Klein at the Washington Post called out those naysayers. He said, it's because the pervasive view of gravitas does not stretch to include her. She's collaborative, empathetic, soft-spoken. Why do we only label extroversion as gravitas? Like, she's the most qualified for the job. Like, I'm just really confused why everyone keeps telling me she doesn't have gravitas. She's an amazing human. And I thought, okay, well, there has to be something wrong, right, with how we're defining confidence. And in fact, if you look up the word confidence in the dictionary, it has nothing to do with performance, bravado, or swagger. It's an understanding and appreciation of your own abilities. It's a mindset. It's an inventory of your capabilities. It's not a personality test. And what we've developed is not a personality. It's an inventory of your talents and strengths. And so there are lots of versions of this, right? Strengths Finder, Clifton Strengths, Myers-Briggs. And I said, you know what? All of those cover leadership potential. I want something just about self-esteem. I just want a quick way to just give myself a sense of control in this moment. I don't want a whole leadership evaluation. And so 6 years ago, we did a quantitative study on confidence. It was 1,000 women in the first study. And then we did all these focus groups. We did 32 focus groups. And we started to realize in the data set, and then we replicated it multiple times, that there was not just one way you could describe self-assurance. There were 8 superpowers that underpinned how you felt about yourself. And when we got to those 8, we realized, hey, most people have 2 or 3. My mom does have all 8, by the way. She took our quiz. She's like, I took your quiz. I'm all 8. Actually, 2% of people have all 8. They tend to be over the age of 50. We've become an ageist society. People over the age of 50 are the most capable and powerful in our data set. And it started to create this new language. It's not Pokemon. You don't need to collect them all. I only have 4.5. I had 3 when we started this work. 5 years later, I now have 4.5 because I know which ones I want. And it became this new way for people to say, hey, you know what? This is what I currently have as an inventory of why I should believe in myself in this moment. Not just a performative, you got this, go believe in yourself. It's like, this is why I am so awesome, right?
Yeah.
Here's why. And artists, let's get into the 8, because now your listeners are like, she's breadcrumbing us.
Yes,
I can't buy her book. Should we get into the 8?
We should get into the 8. For me, and I would recommend that anyone who's listening really actually look into the 8, get the book, because it is to me transformative to understand where you are and what your strengths really are, what your superpowers are, and then, like you, which ones you want, right? And then thinking about how to do the work to get there. So it was great because we started off with leading and knowing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I go like this, I'm going to have them all, right?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, artist, I'm going to give you the 8, and then I'm going to guess which ones you have, because I know you well enough that I think I could guess, and you're going to say if I got them right, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so the 8 are leading, which is I'm in charge, I'm in command, I inspire vision and followership. This is a very classic form of confidence. The second one is what I'm doing with you right now, performing. Charisma, center stage, extroversion, loving the exchange of energy between 2 people. And these 2 are the most often written about. When you say to someone, be more confident, it's usually be in charge, or speak up more, they represent less than 15% of our data set. And I think that's why 80% of us have been made to feel bad most of our lives. By the way, if we led and performed all day, nothing would get done. The next two are achieving. I have a winner's mindset. If you set a goal, I will meet or exceed it. I like to get things done. Practice makes perfect. If I fail, I try again. And so you can think of any athlete mindset when you think about achieving. Knowing, which is I'm thoughtful, I'm process oriented, I'm the smartest person in the room. You want to build IKEA furniture with someone who has knowing as that superpower. The best example in culture of achieving and knowing are the 3 Black women in the movie Hidden Figures. So how do 3 Black women succeed at NASA? They weren't leading and performing. They were the smartest, quote unquote, computers who could do the calculations to send a man into space.
Yeah.
They didn't have traditional gravitas. They weren't the white males leading the project. But you now think about why that movie is so compelling. It's these underrepresented stories around achieving and knowing that are finally being celebrated. The next two are giving, or the next two in the set are giving and believing. So giving, I'm empathetic, I care about others, I believe in relationships. Believing, if anyone is a Ted Lasso fan, believing was his superpower. And that believing, we think of, I see the best in everyone in every situation. I have optimism. If things don't work out, they weren't meant to be. And if you know that TV show in season 1, he actually has a monologue where he says, I've been underestimated my entire life because I'm not a commander coach. I'm not here to win or lose. I'm here to make everyone the best versions of themselves. And you see that by season 3, that is a polar opposite coaching style to the team to Rupert's team, right? Which is commanding, right? And all of a sudden you realize, well, they didn't get the top position. They came in number 2. They still changed the culture of that organization. And then the last 2 we talk about are creating. That's my top superpower. I can see things before other people do. I bet Sue Downs scores highly on creating. I will ideas into existence. I can create something from nothing. And then self-sustaining, which is the one that's hardest to get, is I like myself. I don't need to impress you. If you criticize me, I don't spiral. It's the quality most needed to ask for a favor or a raise because you're not afraid to hear no, or you know your market value and you're willing to go find someone who appreciates it. But together, these 8 superpowers change the way we think about underlying confidence. When someone says to you, be more confident, you're like, oh my gosh, that's ambiguous and it's anxiety inducing. I always tell people, okay, just say which of these 8. Do you want me to be more outspoken and performing? Do you want me to be more self-sustaining and not spiral when I have feedback? Like which of these 8, right? It just changes the way you have those conversations. Or you can celebrate somebody who has a different set of superpowers. So my team is not high on performing. They're very high on achieving and believing and knowing and self-sustaining. They get things done. My profile of superpowers, I get nothing done on time. And what's interesting is someone on my team said, this is the first place I felt valued as an introvert. And I said, why? And she goes, well, every time I was in another place, they would just tell me, you need to speak up more. You need to be more confident. And here you're like, Lisa will say, you know what? I know your superpower. You go think about it. When you're ready, it could be a day or 2 from now. I'm not going to put you on the spot to answer the question. Just come back to me with what you think the answer is. And introverts really thrive on our team. They're like, she gets me. You know, she doesn't force me to answer the question.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So where do you think I landed?
Well, I definitely think you're high on knowing. Tell me I'm right on that one.
You're right.
You're a doctor.
You're right.
Come on. How do you not? I would actually say you probably have a smattering of giving and believing just because, or one of those 2.
It's a little bit on the giving.
Okay, giving, good.
Yep.
You might actually have some self-sustaining. I feel like you don't feel the need to impress anyone.
That's the one that's hardest for me.
Really? We should talk about that.
Yeah, that one's the one that's hardest for me.
And I think leading. I think you have leading and achieving, and that's why you're chief medical officer.
And so, so you got them, right? But the self-sustaining it's the power I want, and the power that I don't have.
Artist, because, when I met you, I would have thought you were very high on self-sustaining, right? Just because you just have a very strong sense of self, but maybe it's the leading. People who score high on leading basically can fake things. Like everyone thinks I'm high on self-sustain, and that's true. So we found in the data set, if leading is one of your top 3 superpowers, you don't really need the other ones. The problem is when you don't get validated, or when you don't win an award, or you don't hit a milestone, you beat yourself up if you don't have self-sustaining. And so that's the one. When I say I have 4.5, I started out with 3: leading, performing, and creating. Makes sense. And then I added giving because my team told me I was too demanding. It's fine. And the half score is self-sustaining. And my brother that's his top superpower. He is my role model for self-sustaining. And I realized that I needed at least half of that, because if I had a setback, I would really beat myself up. If I didn't get external validation or praise, I would think something was wrong with me. And it's hard on LinkedIn, by the way, when everybody's winning something or getting promoted and you're like, what am I doing wrong with my life?
What about me?
Yeah. And so self-sustaining is great because you can be like, you know what? I'm happy for them because I got a lot of good things going on here. I don't need the world to see them all.
That's amazing, because I have a really good friend who is the model of self-sustaining. In fact, reading through, I was like, oh my gosh, this is all of this is him. This is what he does, right? And I have tried over the years to imitate some of that, right? But to your point, the high score on leading, it makes me feel like, oh my gosh, it did not work. It is my fault. How am I gonna make this better now? And so I totally get it. And I think that data set is spot on.
It's the quality most people want, by the way. After they read the book, they're like, self-sustaining. How do I get it? And I always tell people it's mindset before behavior. But let me give you a couple of examples of self-sustaining. Number 1, if you're in a group photo, don't look at the photo, right? So people who are high on self-sustaining are like, it's fine if my eyes are closed. It's fine, right? And they act like the world is still film. Do you remember when we used to have 24
Yes.
frames and you would wait a week for you to get your pictures back, and half of them people's eyes were closed and you're like, great, I'm framing this one. So the first thing is, it's not about me, right? And I have started to do that over the last few years. And if you're in a group photo, there's always that one person like, oh, let's take it again. And I'll take it again for them, but I'll never look because I'm like, post it. And I think we took a photo together. I'm like, you're like, do you want to see it? I'm like, nope, I bet it's fine, right? So that's a simple thing. I'll tell you a fun one. Last December, I got bangs. I haven't had bangs since my 20s, okay? And just for your male listeners, when a woman gets bangs, it's kind of a big deal. There's a huge change that happens when you get bangs. Just think Taylor Swift has bangs, Kelly Clarkson has bangs. And I went to dinner with my brother right before Christmas. And my little brother's top superpower is self-sustaining. He just knows who he is. He doesn't need to impress you. He doesn't care what you think of him. And he goes, you got bangs. And I'm like, do you like them? Do you like my bangs? He goes, does it matter if I like them? You're the one that has to look at yourself every day. Why'd you get them if you don't like them? I'm not going to tell you if I like them. You're the one that has to like them. Do you like them? And I was like, I don't know. I think so. He's like, well, I'm not going to tell you. You have to decide if you like them. And I was like, you're right. I love them. And I was like, why was I seeking your approval? I paid for this overpriced haircut.
Yeah. Why did I ask you? Yeah.
So every day I have a daily reminder, be self-sustaining today. You're the one that chose the bangs. But it's a real mindset shift.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Now, but the downfall can be that it's harder to take credit sometimes for the things that you really have achieved. And sometimes you just want to feel good about something you did.
Well, that's why I have a half. I don't need a full. I don't need a full. I just need enough. Right? So everyone's like, oh, don't you want all 8? I'm like, I got 4.5 and that feels fine. And my team has the other 4. But I don't, and we talk about that. Like there's downsides to all these superpowers that we talk about in the book. And what I think is interesting about self-sustaining though, and this is where I think we should wrap up the self-sustaining conversation, is one of the things that I find is if you get a little bit of this superpower, it addresses a lot of your inner critic. And what I mean by that is, if you have envy or FOMO when you scroll social media, go get a little bit of this superpower. And what I mean by that is, I'm happy for everyone on social media, okay? And it's because I know, one, we all have problems. Like as many posts as you're doing about how awesome you are, I know you have problems, right?
Yep.
I do too. And the second thing is, I have a really abundant life. And anytime I see somebody's post, like they've sold their company or just let's be open with each other, they're on vacation in Europe again, damn them. I'm always like, you know what? I make a difference every day. Today I helped someone dress for their son's graduation,
Right.
And if you're self-sustaining, you're like, it's okay, right? Like there's a lot of good here too. And then I would go like that post and just be really happy for them. So I would say just a little bit helps because we're human.
Yeah. Lisa, I am definitely going to have to figure out how to catch up with you when I am in town again, because I feel like I've been missing this piece and you don't realize it as much until you actually get to talk to each other. And so I really want to come by and see the closet. Like,
yeah, anytime.
Because, so fortunately I am in New York from time to time. And so, I'm going to make sure that I kind of calendar these times and see if there's one that'll work so I can come by.
Well, it's funny. Someone said to me, you're like Mary Poppins. You show up when people most need you. It's like, I really needed to hear this today.
Yeah.
One thing I will say for your listeners is obviously I'd love for you to buy the book. You don't have to. You can go to myconfidencelanguage.com and take the quiz for free and discover your superpowers. My marketing director hates when I say this, you don't have to give us your email for marketing purposes. You can unclick the box. I hope you click the box. But, one of the things I love is that we've given that away for free so that you don't have to buy the book. You don't have to buy clothes from us, but you get a chance to see your inventory of superpowers.
That's awesome. So I always ask, what's next?
What's next? Well, my book is being published in multiple languages. So the first one is Japanese. This is out.
Oh,
It came out July 9th. And so we're going on an international book tour. It's kind of fun because you get to see the state of feminism in every country and you get to see the difference you might make in other countries. So we're going global.
That's
we have
awesome.
A really cool Women's Equality Day collection, August 26th, the day women got the right to vote, coming out, which I'm incredibly excited about. We're launching different experiences. Like I think we'll be able to take the work we do next year, the Confidence Closet, the Gravitas transformation experience on the road. But I'm also just really excited to sleep more because I've taken all the longevity tests. And apparently I need to be sleeping 7 to 8 hours. Is that correct, doctor?
That's about right. That's about right. I'm a champion sleeper, so if you need any pointers.
Well, so that I've been doing that for 2 months now and it's changed my life. So what's next? Personally, I am sleeping more. And the last fun thing I'm doing, one thing personally, I think we get into ruts, right? I turn off my phone for a day a week, like things like that. And I had this moment where I was like, my inner child is not having fun. And so the New York Times published the 57 best sandwiches in New York City. And so my group of friends, we created an Instagram account called @57sandos. And we're going to eat all 57 sandwiches this year.
Incredible.
And it's so fun. And literally we went to Brooklyn and ate 3 sandwiches in a day and rode the cyclone at Coney Island, right? And I was like, everybody, I know we're time pressed. We have families, we have careers, but I think everybody should just pick a scavenger hunt in their life. Pick something that they're just going to go have fun hunting down. Like, artists, are you going to go try all 10 best hamburgers in the DMV area, or Carolina, just something fun.
It's interesting you actually bring that up because, so my very first podcast guest was Lenny Friedman, and we decided that we were going to test every microbrewery in the Tri-City area. And so we started off gangbusters. Like, we were going to these things every week. We'd go and we'd test one of these things. And then it becomes hard because, families and obligations like that. But we are dedicated to this cause. And so there are so many, and then new ones pop up, and it just keeps making our list longer. But it's been fun to do that. And so I love that, picking something, and we're going to do them all. You're going to have the sandwiches. We're going to go to the breweries.
So Robert Putnam, if you get a chance, he had this great piece in the New York Times 2 weeks ago. He's a professor at Harvard. He's in his 80s now. And 25 years ago, he met with Clinton, and then he met with Obama. And he predicted loneliness and polarization. And he said, the greatest thing we can do to overcome these is everyone should go join a club. He's like, just go bridge the social gap with people you don't know, or find a reason to go do things. And he said, it's not surprising that in the 1960s, we had the civil rights movement because we were more connected than ever. We watched the lunar landing together. We were in bowling leagues. We had the Boy Scouts. He talked about this idea of bridging social connection. And right after that, I read about these Korean women who have a vacation fund. So they all save up money all year long, and then they have a contract that they will use the money to all go on vacation together. So I love this idea of like, have an adventure, scavenger, or like everyone put $100 into the pot and we'll have dinner once a quarter together, right? Like, there's just all these things. So I'm trying it out with sandwiches. We got a budget and a list, and we're going to catalog it on Instagram. And by the way, the Instagram account, I told everyone, like, I'm not looking for followers. I'm not trying to be a foodie influencer. Let's be clear. It's more like I want the journal, right? I want the documentation. I want the fun to be cataloged, just even for my own memories.
That is amazing. Then I'm going to add that to the list of things that I can bother you with whenever I come back to New York. Maybe we'll have a sandwich too. Lisa, it's been fantastic catching up with you. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're extremely busy, and it's just been phenomenal catching up with you.
Thank you so much, artist.
If you enjoyed the show and think others would, make sure that you tell your friends, click the like button, and subscribe so you don't miss anything coming up. As always, I thank you for spending some time with us. I hope you really, truly got something out of this episode. Stay remarkable, and we'll talk to you next time.